developing our sleeve pattern for our Dartless Stretchy Knit Sloper set. You will need the sleeve pattern from your basic sloper set. It should include the elbow dart here, of course our cap curve, and our notches for front and back there. Actually interesting, that's not notched through. That's going to be a hard one to see. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that on out of there. All right, in the instructions starting on page 635, our paper that we'll be working this on is needed to be folded down the right-hand edge. So fold it in half lengthwise, make sure it's long enough to accommodate your sleeve all the way, and wide enough to also accommodate the sleeve. Set it up as the diagram is, so the folded edge is down the right-hand side. We're going to use our sleeve here. The other thing that we will need to do, depending on where your grain line is marked on the sleeve, we actually need to make sure that grain line is in the center. So I find my bicep line and work that line. But since we need to actually trace our front edge of the sleeve and we'll be having to flip it upside down like so, I went ahead and marked my bicep line and then squared the center line from that. Now I'm going to align that guideline on my folded edge. Now down here at the wrist, because of the elbow dart and the angling, you're going to find this looks wider than that part. For right now, just follow that folded or centered line. So I'm going to have to split the difference here a little bit off screen, making sure that line is on my fold. And now I am tracing this edge of the sloper pattern. I'm going to go ahead and put that single dart mark in there. I'm not going to mark my top notch. My fold line will now become my center notch for this whole pattern. Okay. Working in here, we're going to tighten up the underarm curve and the fit under the arm. So it's going to have us mark or square off from the underarm seam here, point, squaring off to the fold line. So look through your ruler, make sure you're at a right angle and at the level of this. So there's my bicep line. It's going to have us move in a ½ inch, and we're actually going to then square up and move up ½ inch, so over and up ½ inch each, and then we're going to redraw our armhole curve here. Let me find my French curve, and that is you just kind of blend it back into that curve in a way. There we go. All of that will be removed, and then we'll be readjusting our side here, but before doing so we're going to also adjust our wrist. So the book said to at this point right here we are squaring off a straight line from our wrist level, and then to figure out how far over to make it, it's going to be 1/2 of our wrist measurement plus 1/4 of an inch to give us a little bit of extra around that. So I had actually already pre-measured the width here across the bottom of my pattern piece. It came out to be 8 inches. So half of that would be 4 inches, and then 1/4 inch more. So here is going to be my new side edge, and then I would be redrawing this line. But prior to doing all of that, I am going to walk my measurement curve here and compare that to the measurements I have on my armhole curve on my front and my back sleeve, which, since they're the same curve, should be 7 5/8. I expect that my sleeve should be 1/4 inch larger to even ½ an inch larger measurement than my sleeve opening on that. So walking your measurement, you're going to have to rotate your ruler as the edge stays to the edge of the curve. And you want to be careful that your ruler does not shift on you as you are working your way around. Okay, reason doing this is, all right, I came out with 7 3/4. My measurement on my armhole is 7 5/8. That is actually only 1/8 of an inch. So before striking my side seam here, I am going to make that adjustment, grow it back out that way for me, that 1/8 of an inch. So now this curve will be 7 7/8 in its measurement, and it fits to an armhole of 7 5/8. But you always have a little bit extra to ease in for the armhole curve. Your book shows on page 635 that when checking these measurements, some cases you may need to increase this out, or in some cases you may need to reduce it and move it in. That is absolutely normal, that happens every now and again, because everybody's working a slightly different work with our pattern. Then our side seam here, or underarm seam on the sleeve, is going to have a slight curve to it. And again, by doing it in a couple stages here with my straight ruler, I can blend that. But you can use your vary curve to give that just a slight curve inwards. We will trim that out, open up the piece, and be able to have a full piece that we will mark all the way around. The sleeve for the knit sloper is identical on the left and right. The only thing that will help keep us straight when putting them into our garments is making sure that we have our set of notches set up. So I'll come back after I've trimmed this out and transferred it to my oak tag and talk to you about establishing the notches on the sleeve pattern. All right, the sleeve pattern, I have taken what we drafted from our half of a sleeve. Here we go. Put it back there. Remember, we had drawn that on our folded paper, used our front half of our sleeve to draw that, made some adjustments to raise and tighten in the underarm, little adjustments to our curve. We measured our curve to match to the armhole openings on our front and our back, made any adjustments to make sure that that fit correctly. And then very carefully, when I cut this out, I needed to make sure that the lower level of the paper did not shift as the scissors closed. So make sure that you hold it very tight or flat to the table as much as you can, or staple it. It won't move, and then you can remove the staples. I opened that up using that fold line. I aligned it on a pre-drawn guideline, laid that out, and traced around the curves and everything. But now we need to make our notches. There's my pencil. So our guideline for the center will be our center top notch. We'll mark that or notch that out right on that line. Now on a sleeve, the left side is where the back notches go, because that is where it would match up to the back. And then therefore on the right hand side is where the right hand one goes. So to mark these notches, I'm flipping over my back piece and I match up under the arm, and I'm going to maybe walk that curve a little bit. They're not identical curves, but I walk it so that the distance from here to there and here to there to start my notch set will be the same. Now, my front one, I have not established yet a notch mark, so I can do it a couple different ways. I could just pick a spot, notch it out, and do the same thing with our front to our sleeve piece, or I can do that all in one step. I match under the arms and then kind of walk this around the curve, but making sure nothing slipped and keeping them aligned. I can just get my notcher and drop in my single notch. Therefore, each of those match up so that when going back to sew those things around the curve, it all matches up. So we'll finish this out. Remember, a notch on the guideline for the center, and then these that we marked from the back piece. I'll complete this pattern out with my labeling. I do need to put my size on here for each of these, and that will complete a Dartless stretchy knit set. And in the book on page 634, it does show that in the case you had super stretchy fabric and you wanted a tighter fit, yes, you could adjust your pattern even an inch more coming in, and even coming in at the hip level 1 inch to make it much tighter fit through the hip and buttocks area. It really depends on the fabric of the intended design if that needs to be done to your sloper. Otherwise, you can keep your sloper at this, make that adjustment anytime you're working a new pattern off of this set of slopers. And that will culminate our lesson and activity on the Dartless Stretchy Knit Sloper Set.